And with the stunning Alleluia by the British composer, the living British composer, John Tavener, this funeral service for Diana, the Princess of Wales, comes to an end. And now, with the enthusiastic support of the nation, there will be throughout the nation a minute's silence. And so ended, 3 hours ago almost, Diana, the Princess of Wales' funeral service at Westminster Abbey. In the intervening time, her coffin has been taken in a hearse to the county of North Hampshire, about 80 miles away from here, where she will be buried inside the grounds of her ancestral family home, the Spencer family home. ABC's Jim Wooten is up there at the moment, and I think, Jim, if I hear correctly, that her body has almost arrived.
Yes, Peter, it is approaching this village of Harleston, which is one of two villages that sort of bookend the enormous, sprawling estate called Althorpe, where her family has lived for nearly 500 years. One of the misconceptions about Diana was that she was referred to as a commoner. In fact, she was an aristocrat. The house in which she spent many of her childhood years was also the home of one of the greatest art collections, private art collections in London, with Rubens and Van Dycks and Sargents hanging on the walls. It once had a moat, a race course, and among her ancestors were ambassadors and ministers of state to various kings and viceroys of Ireland and elsewhere. So that the life she came to as the Princess of Wales was not entirely unlike the life she had known as a child.
Are there a lot of people there today?
There are. Lining the road which leads into Harleston, which is a narrow asphalt road, are several hundred. Waiting at the gates to the family estate are some 3,000 people, many of whom have been there since last night. Some have ridden across the fields and the pastures on horseback to pay their last respects. And standing behind stanchions, or crash barriers as they're called here, are hundreds, young and old, children, the elderly, motorcyclists, waiting quietly, patiently for the procession and the hearse and the princess's coffin to pass by.
Prince Charles, her ex-husband, and the two young princes, their sons, and the Spencer family are actually at the Althorpe estate at the moment, awaiting the hearse. The Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh and the Queen Mother are about to fly back to Balmoral in Scotland. The intention, Jim, is to have this as private as possible.
Exactly, and I think one of the tip-offs to that, of course, that's been all of that this week, is that was that rather angry tribute, perhaps the angriest eulogy I've ever heard in any funeral, from the princess's brother, Earl Spencer, and in which he said that the blame rests with the press.
I think a great many people have been talking. In fact, people have been talking more about that as a central feature of the funeral service here in Westminster Abbey, what the Earl Spencer had to say, than almost any other facet of it. But everybody has had a moment or two, Barbara, beyond that, which has moved them very much. But it was clear, at least on this occasion, the Spencers wanted to get out of the private eye as quickly as possible, or out of the public eye as quickly as possible.
Oh, they certainly do now at this last resting place for the princess. They've kept it as private as possible. All of the members of the Spencer family have had difficulties in the past. It was an unhappy childhood. The sister of the princess was anorexic. Her brother, Earl Spencer, has lived the last few years in South Africa, separated from his wife, who is also anorexic. Princess Diana herself didn't come to live here until she was almost 14. She had been living in London, had to go through the terrible separation of her family, and came to this 100-room house. Really, when she was an adolescent, it was a lonely childhood, and the two sisters and brother, especially the brother, had to cling to each other.
As some fairly wise and learned English commentator wrote this morning, here again we have, by the repeat of what we saw in London, people throwing flowers onto the hearse as it moves through Harleston. Some, I think, fairly wise English commentator said this morning that the French bury their famous in Parthenons and the Italians choose mausoleums, but the English return to the soil of England. Jim Wooten?
Yes, and now the hearse is coming into the outskirts of Harleston at the end of its long, slow journey from the urban sprawl of London to the quietly rural rolling landscape of Northamptonshire, where she spent most of her childhood. There is
as best
applause.
We can tell. Sorry, Jim.
There is some applause, and as you pointed out, some flowers being thrown in. This was the world's most photographed woman, and these are, ironically, among the last pictures we will have of her coffin. For as she approaches the gates of her family estate, there will be no more cameras, no more press, no more pictures of her coffin.
His decision to bury Diana on the family estate, on a small oval island, in fact, in the middle of an ornamental lake, which you can see there, breaks the Spencer tradition, because so many generations have been buried nearby in the Church of St. Mary the Virgin in Great Brinkton, including her father. And so Diana, who felt so passionately and so strongly about her father, the late Earl Spencer, will not be buried beside him. And in the continuing discussion of how this place shall be remembered, Althorpe, or as the famous Debrett's peerage book says, Althrop, somebody has made it clear today that Diana's father always said, "It was Althorpe, my boy. Anything else was slightly pretentious."
Peter,
Barbara.
if people have not watched all day, all of the flowers that you see in the top of the hearse and in the front were thrown there by people as it's gone through the countryside and the city here, thrown there with love, just as so many flowers were put here over the last week for her. Princess Diana went often to the place in which she will be finally buried. She used to go there with the young princess, and they planted trees there. They planted oak trees. It's a tradition of the family. So those trees will live and grow as the two young men will, the two boys.
Jim Wooten has undoubtedly had a lot of time today waiting for the hearse to arrive there to talk to local people. Jim, I suppose it's asking the all too obvious question, but how do people feel about the way this place is now likely to become, given that an icon is going to be buried there?
Well, a lot of them breathed a long sigh of relief, Peter, when the family decided to inter the remains of the princess on the island, on the estate, and then open it for a couple of weeks a year to the public, instead of using the Church of the Virgin Mary in the town of Great Bringston, because that would have produced, townspeople were saying, a sort of irresistible attraction to this village, to turn it into, as I think you called it, another Graceland in Memphis. This is definitely not Memphis, but as one person said to us this morning, nothing ever happens here, and that's exactly how we like it. Of course, that has all changed this past week and today, but most of these people are desperately hoping that that nothing will happen here in these quiet villages that surround the family estate.
You yourself, Jim, point out how long the Spencer family history is. I think the only thing I heard you leave out was that the connection to Lawrence Washington, the great-great-great-grandfather of George Washington, buried in the Spencer tomb in 1616.
Yes, they are relatives. The Spencers, the Washingtons, and of course the Churchills, as a matter of fact. There are all kinds of bloodlines running through the Spencer family. The prominence of the family was perhaps best noted when one of her ancestors was called the man with the most ready cash in the kingdom.
So, Jim, as we watch this funeral procession now very close to the family estate at Althorpe Park, I want to bring in somebody we've relied on a lot this morning, Sarah Bradford, one of the royal biographers, biographer of the Queen, who's been with us this morning. Sarah, we haven't talked to you in quite a while because we ran the service again, but what have you been thinking in the meantime?
Well, I've been thinking what a very beautiful and suitable service it was, and how it combined traditional music with modern music. And I think that the concept of Elton John playing in Westminster Abbey was a real tribute to Diana. And I must say that I was greatly moved by it. And now here we are, seeing this girl who was born in the country, not in Northamptonshire, but actually next to the royal family's house at Sandringham, going back to the English countryside. And I think this is another moving image.
Do you have any inclination today to think of her as a now permanent fixture in the British mentality in some way, or have we witnessed the passing of a shooting star?
No, I don't think she is a shooting star. Of course, what's happened over the past week has been incredible. I don't think any of us have ever witnessed a funeral like this, or worldwide mourning to quite such an extent. After all, let's say Elvis, but then he was one particular generation, whereas Diana seems to have touched both young and old. And I don't think she'll be quickly forgotten. And I think that whenever people look at her children, particularly Prince William, who does greatly resemble her, they'll remember her, and they'll remember her legacy.
We've also had a great deal of help this morning from Tony Holden, who's also with us here in London, another royal biographer, wrote a biography of Prince Charles, among other things. What have you been thinking, Tony, since we last spoke to you?
Peter, I took the chance to have a little walk around the streets and talk to a few people, and I think the service went down so well that it will be some kind of emotional full stop to what's been a very, very extraordinary week here in the UK. And I think people are already thinking, where do we go from here? How do we get back to normal? And I think, thanks, as you've mentioned, to the very powerful speech of Earl Spencer, two things that have to happen is the media has to rethink its way of practicing a bit, and the royal family's got to rethink its way of going about things a bit. And these two issues, if you like, will be the beginning of a legacy of Diana that will be seen, I think, in all sorts of ways. I was saying earlier, I personally feel there's been some change in the national character this week. It's been so wonderful to see people expressing their emotions publicly, which the British are not renowned for doing. Somehow this feels a warmer, more human country, thanks to Diana. That will be one of her legacies, which will live on in her son, William. But all sorts of other things are going to happen too.
All right, well, we'd like to talk about some of those when we come back, now that Diana has joined her former husband and her 2 sons and the rest of the Spencer family at Althorpe, the family estate in Northamptonshire. Well, the burial will be private. We'll go away for just a moment, and when we come back, we'll talk to Michael Cole, among others, who is the spokesperson for Mohammed Fayed, the father of Dodi Fayed, who died with Diana in Paris the other day, because the British and much of the world are still not yet fully satisfied that they know completely what happened. We'll be right back.
ABC News coverage of Diana, Princess of Wales, The Final Farewell will continue in a moment.
Whether they cook in a crowded metropolis or a one-horse town, people who cook for a living are the pickiest people on earth, because they know it takes the best ingredients to make the best meals. Maybe that's why they cook with Uncle Ben's converted brand rice. Fluffy, great tasting, and perfect every time. No wonder more restaurants serve Uncle Ben's than any other brand of rice. Meal after meal, good cooks cook with Uncle Ben's.
I love being a mom, but I was still miserable because I was so heavy, and I knew I had to do something. I lost over 50 pounds on the Slim Fast plan. Just keep them in the fridge, grab them, shake them up, have my lunch while I'm feeding him. It's just such a healthy drink.
With 23 vitamins and minerals, protein, calcium, fiber, all the balanced nutrition like a healthy meal.
Oh, I feel very healthy, and I have to be to keep up with him.
Slim Fast, balanced nutrition for a healthy life.
What more could you want?
This is how water flows through clean drains. But over time, this gunky buildup slows drains down.
You need Drainomax Buildup Remover. It's the best because it starts working faster. Whoa! Get the Max.
Claritin. Escape the limitations of seasonal allergies.
Blue sky smiling at me.
Only 1 tablet means 24-hour non-drowsy seasonal allergy relief. Claritin, the #1 prescription
A tribute to Princess Diana, and also, of course, to Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa died in India yesterday at 87 years old, a woman who was a towering example for people all over the world of selflessness and kindness and commitment to the poor. The president said in the case of both these women that each demonstrated what it is to live a life of meaning with concern for others, and he called it their greatest legacy. One of the people we have relied on tremendously this morning, and it's been a great honor to have you here, is Andrew Morton, journalist and author who wrote the book about Diana's life, wrote 2 books about Diana's life, which shed so much light about her on the world. And what do you think after this day?
Well, Peter, Barbara, I've been thinking for the last 3 hours about all this, and there'll be conversations and investigations into the crash. There'll be investigations into the press. There'll be debate about the future of the monarchy. But what I hope everybody's going to take away from today is our thoughts about Diana. Let's not forget her personality, her sense of humour, her sense of goodness, her Christian charity. Let's not deify her. Let's not make her an icon. Let's not turn her into a saint. She was a flesh and blood human being, and that's why she was so immensely popular, because she had this resonance. She spoke to us, and I think that the rest of it is a side issue. Today is Diana's day, and let's just remember Diana.
There's been a lot of monarchy bashing this week, and there's been some of it today, and yet it strikes me, or maybe I'm just being too sentimental, that this country without a monarchy is not Britain.
No, I think a light has gone out in Buckingham Palace, probably the brightest light that you will see this century, and we'll not see her like again. But the flag is flying over Buckingham Palace now. That means that Diana may be dead, but the monarchy will continue. It will not continue in the same way. I think Britain today is probably a better place. It's a more subdued place, more reflective, and I think many, many people have learned many lessons from the events of the last 7 days.
You have been wonderful and helped us understand a lot today. I very much appreciate it. Also want to thank Tony Holden, our other royal biographer, and Sarah Bradford, all three of whom have added immeasurably to our appreciation of this. And a final very quick word, we're going to go to the streets where so much of this happened. Cynthia McFadden and Aaron Brown have been out talking to the people who have stood by Diana so eloquently in the last several days. From you, Cynthia, a final comment?
Well, Peter, if I've learned anything in this week, and certainly today, it is she certainly was the people's princess. The most moving of all the tributes I think I saw today was the silence, the respect, and the way that this crowd has behaved all day today. There was no finer tribute, perhaps, to Diana in her life than the way the British people and people from around the world gathered here conducted themselves.
Okay, Cynthia, thank you very much for helping us get through the morning and the afternoon. Aaron Brown.
Peter, 1 million people came to Hyde Park today, but I think it's a mistake to see it as an event of a large crowd. These were 1 million individual thoughts. This was my turn, a woman said today, my turn to grieve. And I suspect 1 million people standing in that crowd thought very privately and will not soon forget the experience they had here.
Okay, Aaron Brown, thank you very much. And Barbara, I'm struck, as always, I said this before, so it's not original, that you and I were here 16 years ago on a different balcony to witness the wedding of Prince Charles and Diana. What are your thoughts today?
Well, I never in a million years, and I'm sure neither did you, Peter, think that we would be here covering her funeral. I think it was enormously moving to both of us, to everyone, and to you, Andrew, as well, who has been here on a personal level. One of her friends said yesterday, I just wish that she had known how much that she was loved. I can't pretend to have been an intimate friend, although I did know her. And she touched so many lives, and I have to say she touched mine as well.
Well, thank you very much. Once again, it's been a great pleasure to work with you.
Thank you, Peter.
Good Morning America Sunday is still coming along in some parts of the country. This week with Cokie Roberts. Cokie Roberts is actually here in London, World News. Tonight, Sunday, will be coming along as well. We have a great many people to thank. Much of the coverage you saw today was provided by the British Broadcasting Corporation, but our thanks to our own technical staff who, as always, managed to capture the right moment for us. And we thank you for joining us all across the country for this quite extraordinary day. We've said it before, but at the beginning of this week, there were so many cynical people about this, and a lot of people who thought that the media sort of generated much of it, and there's no doubt we contributed to it. But if you'd listen to everybody here in London today, the high and the mighty, and those who are perhaps less mighty than when it all began, there is a feeling from all of them that this country has, in some small way, changed. I'm Peter Jennings. Thank you very much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.
This has been a special presentation from ABC News.